Hello guys, Dizzy here. With the coming release of Baldur's Gate 3, I'm sure many people, including myself, will be eager to get their hands on it and eventually make a review. Now, I think it would be a good idea to provide the framework for whatever review that would come. So that's what this video is all about. Without further delay, let's get into it. Now, before I continue, I'd just like to ask you to consider clicking the like and subscribe button to be notified of new RPG and Baldur's Gate content. So what makes a game a good RPG game? That's a good question to ask, but it's not one that's easy to answer, especially since RPG games over the years, the label or the name or the genre RPG games has been diluted and been attached to many kinds of games, ranging from old school CRPG games to shooter types with mere RPG elements in them. But be that as it may, I would still attempt to answer the question by giving you four concepts that I think makes an RPG game a good one. So one of the things that makes an RPG game a good one is its immersiveness. Now it's kind of difficult to discuss because it involves many things, but the TLDR is immersiveness is what makes a player be mentally and emotionally invested in the game, and on what makes he or she feel like they are in the game. I mean, that's why we're playing RPG games in the first place, right? So having said that, the story, the character, the backdrop of the character, the history of the game world, the interactions between characters and their world as the game progresses all can contribute to the game's immersiveness. Maybe to some it's the realism, or perhaps it's the level of, of fantasy that's in the game. Anything could contribute to its immersiveness as long as at the end of the day he or she, whoever's playing the game, feels like they are part of the game world, that they are in it. So next up is a combat system. So guys, let's face it, most of us play games because we want to be involved in fictitious combat, and playing RPG games is no different. Now, if you come to think about it, combat would be a significant part of our playing experience in an RPG game. So a good combat system should first and foremost be designed in such a way that it would not be a pain in the ass to do it over and over again. That the player should look forward to it instead of dread it and skip it if possible. Now, another feature of a good combat system is that whatever type of character a player chooses to use in the game, they should have not the same impact but equal. But whatever impact they do have should be equally important. Now, again, not the same in the kind of impact that they do, but the importance of the impact that they do should be the same. So, for example, a player character chooses a fighter. Of course, it should have a different impact than if a player character chooses a wizard in combat. Otherwise, it would be pointless to distinguish between the two. But their distinct individual contributions to the combat should be of equal import and should have their own uses in the combat system. Now, last but not the least, the combat system should be paced fast enough so as not to waste everybody's time, but not too fast as to stress out the characters playing them. I mean, RPGs are traditionally turn-based because they want to emphasize and make use of the player character's ability to think and solve problems. So your combat system should allow for that cognitive process to occur. Otherwise, it's not good. So those are the things that I think make an RPG system's combat system good. Next is the progression system. Now, this is very closely linked to the combat system in that one affects the other and vice versa. And also, therefore, what makes one good is very similar to what makes the other good. So, like the combat system, the progression system should not be too fast, in the sense that players should have the time enough to appreciate and familiarize themselves and use the new powers they get in their progression before a new one comes in, because it would be pretty useless to get a whole bunch of powers don't even understand what they are and use them. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, the progression system should also not be too slow in the sense that a player character has fought 1,000 battles with the same powers because he or she is yet to level up. Although it is to be noted that on that end of the spectrum, there's more room for error and there's more leeway because in general, by default, RPG players are more patient and understand that it takes a bit of time for their characters to develop and have new powers and level up. But be that as it may, it should still be not too long in between levels. Now, another thing that makes a progression system good is that it should provide the distinct playing experiences that corresponds to the distinct choices that it makes available to its players. So, for example, in a system wherein you follow a more common class-based approach. So, a player who chooses class 1 should have a distinct, significantly different playing experience from a player who chooses to use class 2. Now, for games who have a progression system that's more points-based, wherein you distribute those points in certain skills or what have you, and those define your character, in that kind of system, a player who chooses to invest their points in characteristic or a skill A and B should have a significantly different playing experience from a person who chooses to invest their points in characteristic or skill C and D. So that kind of distinct experience is what I'm talking about. So last but not the least is replayability, which ironically is also very closely linked to the progression system, because the distinctiveness that I talked about in the progression system contributes to the replayability of a game. So again, if you take role 1 and have a certain gaming experience and have that more or less same gaming experience if you take on role 2, then the distinction between role 1 and role 2 is meaningless. And it would discourage you from playing the game again, thus eliminating the replayability of the game. So a good RPG game should have the opposite of that. It should encourage a player who has finished the game, should make him or her excited to play the game again using another role or taking on another role. So those four are what I think would make a good RPG game. Now, if you're still here, thank you for sticking till the end, and thank you for dropping by the video. And as always, see you guys on the next one.